Hey, welcome back to the Relentless Positivity Podcast. We've got another awesome guest here today. It's my friend Jill Falling. So she is an Uplift Effect Coach and Consulting. LLC is the name of her business. And she also has a podcast, Uplift Effect Podcast. She's also a grief and trauma expert. She's got a lot of interesting things, a lot of interesting background she's going to tell us about. So Jill, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me. I really am truly excited. I don't always get to be on this side.
Yeah, it's nice, right? Yeah, hosting your own podcast it's sometimes nice to be a guest, right? So yeah, let's talk about, I mentioned earlier. So tell people a little bit about your background. Not many people have the experience that you have.
Yeah. Well, so I educationally am a grief and trauma therapist, and I got a master's degree in clinical psych and had the wonderful blessing of working here locally at the Children's Advocacy Center. So if you're familiar with that, that could be unfortunate, but it is a facility that is all worldwide. We just happen to have the national headquarters here in Huntsville, which is a really cool gig to get. And so I worked with children who were sexually molested, sexually abused, physical abuse, and severe neglect. And so I spent some years working with children doing a thing called trauma-focused cognitive behavior therapy and helping them to navigate the terrain of the trauma that they had been through, whether it was sexual abuse, physical abuse, whatever. Interestingly enough, every time I would be working with a child, I would typically interview their parents, most often their mother. And every time I had a sexual abuse case, I asked the mother of this child, do you potentially happen to come from a background of sexual abuse? Every time the answer was yes.
Wow.
So it doesn't take too long. I mean, I'm not the sharpest, tool in the box, but eventually you begin to notice there's a common denominator here, right? And so I was like, gosh, there is something up. I went to my supervisor and I was like, is this genetic? I mean, like, what is the deal with this? Is happening in family generations, and many of the women would self-disclose that their mother was also a victim of sexual abuse. And I'm like, we got to do something about this. And I really felt like that my place was with children. And for a while it was, but then eventually I was called to do the next best thing, which is death and dying. And so there's a story there. But anyway, I worked in the ICU units at all in North Alabama, and it was through the avenue of organ donation. So I would go in with a family who was facing an imminent death. I would explain to them what brain death meant, what it looks like in this case, that their loved one had a non-survivable injury, and walk them through the beginning processes of the worst days of their life. And so I worked with families in crisis for a lot of years doing that and giving death notifications, and just helping them to understand what was going on, what had happened, giving them information and talking to them about the potential of organ donation. Then the pandemic happened and my life needed to pivot again. And I still carried this thing inside of me about this issue with these children and family generational curses, for lack of a better word. And I, this summer, put together a huge parenting academy with 28 worldwide international speakers, which I would never recommend anyone to ever do that. It was really, really hard work. And I discovered that many therapists, many authors are spending their life working this very issue because we've never been parents before. We've just been parented. And so what happens is, unless we've had healing, unless we've had counseling or coaching or whatever, our natural position is to go back to our default pattern. So naturally, we then replicate what was done to us, unless we have been taught something different. So parents are very discouraged. They don't know what to do in parenting. They struggle with death and dying and grief and all the things that happen in life. And they don't know how to talk to their kids about it. They don't know how to help their kids through it. They don't always know how to protect their kids from things because they didn't have that modeled for them in their life. So as I began that journey, in that parenting academy that I put together, I had many authors, and they all said, you need to write a book. You need to write a book. And I was like, what? Well, the reason that came about is because I'm a single parent of 4 kids. I have 3 boys and a girl. And I realized that through the process of helping other parents in their parenting journey, I had something that I was doing in my parenting journey that was really, really working. And I feel very passionate about it. And that was using the avenue of sports to help teach and raise and grow my children, who are all 4 very, very different and needed very, very different things. They all had different strengths and weaknesses. And I discovered that sports can fit any equation. And so now I am really kind of adjusting my podcast. I'm working on a book. I'm adjusting my podcast, still doing a lot of parenting support. I still talk about death and dying and grief and how to talk to children about those things and how to get kids through divorce and all of these really life complicated things, how to develop relationships with our kids, how to get our kids to talk. I mean, that doesn't seem like it should be so hard, but it is. It is actually hard. So, but I'm now also incorporating what I have done with sports as an athlete myself, but also then with my children as a coach to them, as I have coached them, and then in their own sports individually, and how that has been an incredible tool in raising my kids. Man. So that's the long story long.
Yeah, that's an interesting, but so you've had some of the most awkward difficult conversations ever, right? Is there anything you're not comfortable talking to someone about at this point?
No. Matter of fact, the funniest thing about that, Joe, is I used to say, really, I make a living at giving like the worst news ever, like the worst conversations you could ever imagine, to tell a parent your child has reported sexual abuse. And oh, by the way, it's your dad. That's not easy. And your child has a non-survivable injury and is now progressing to brain death and is not going to recover. I mean, and they're 19, you know, I mean,
I can't imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tough work. Very, very tough work.
Yeah. So that makes it a little bit easier to do anything else in your life, I'm sure. So
that's right.
Do you work with a lot of parents?
This is way easier.
So what are some common parenting mistakes that you see that probably we all do, that you kind of see, that kind of a general that all of us make? What are some mistakes we're all making as parents?
You know, I think one of the easiest things, not to bash on parents, because my message is always about giving hope, encouragement, support, and inspiration to parents. I want parents to feel empowered to step into their role as a parent. But what happens is, as I kind of alluded to, we end up in a default pattern. Typically, we parent how we were parented. And if that was really good, great. But oftentimes, my experience has been that most of the time that's not the case. It wasn't good. And even the best of parents have things about that still, there's no perfect parenting. We're not going to be either. So one of the things I see happening is struggling to know, for instance, what do healthy boundaries look like? Parents have a very difficult time knowing where their child begins and ends and where they begin and end. And I'm guilty of the same thing. A common example is when my child is hurt, I can't decide who hurts worse. Them or me.
Yeah.
Right? And that's just part of parenting. That's being very connected to your children. Well, that really, really can cloud how we discipline our children, how we interact, how we talk to them. A lot of times parents will say, all of a sudden I hear myself saying the same thing to my kid that my dad said to me that I hated. And I swore I would never say. And out of frustration, I ended up repeating the same thing. And so there is hope. We can parent our kids differently. If you were not parented in a way that worked out well for you, that you want to do different, you can learn new skills, and it's never too late.
Yeah, I've heard you describe that a lot of us are wounded children raising children now. So is that something we need to fix ourselves first? Is that where it starts? I mean, where would you start from square one for something like that?
Yeah. There's a book called, and a phrase called, hurt people hurt people.
Sure, yeah.
And that's true. I mean, and so, yes, That's why I did this huge parenting academy this summer, because the truth is, until we work our issues, we are still going to be working out of a broken bucket. I mean, we just are. And so we're not going to see clearly. We're not going to see that we are actually hurting our child when we say something to them that's critical out of our own pain. So an example, common example that happens between mothers and fathers sometimes with their daughters is they'll say, "Ooh, I don't know. I think I would change that outfit. That doesn't look so great." Or, "I don't know if that looks so good on your butt." Can I say that? Or mothers will say, does my butt look big in this? In front of their kid. What we are inadvertently teaching our children is a lesson that is going to be very, very hard to undo. That's about us. We have to be so very careful about what we are saying and what we are doing. And here's the thing. If I'm cheating, my child sees that. They learn from that. I don't even have to tell them. They witness it, and they will become what we are. So if we are still working out of a tremendous amount of trauma and background of brokenness and a lot of pain, we are very controlling in ways that we don't even realize because it was just self-preservation. What do you think we're doing to our children? 9 times out of 10, we're probably parenting them in a way that is over controlling or complete absent parenting. And therefore, we're going to not help what we wanted to fix in the first place. We didn't like it then, and our children are going to have the same story.
That's great. Yeah, I've seen that tons of times. So kind of switching gears a little bit. So I have a teenager. I know a lot of parents with teenagers. It gets tough to kind of keep that bond and that relationship going. What are some tips that you have, not only from your training, but also from your real life experience?
In my house, as for me in my house, my plan is that whatever they're doing, I want to be doing with them. Yeah. So I have a child that's really excited about being a pilot. He loves car engines. I could care less about car engines, but I listen to hours of conversation and I watch YouTube videos with him about certain engines and about different piloting things. And I don't even know how to describe it all because I'm trying to retain it, but I am so not wired that way. I can't even retain the information. I'm trying. Thankfully, my children have all been very athletic. So regardless of the sport that they were playing, I can just tell you straight up, I don't like being a wrestling mom. Thankfully, we've moved past that. But I had to discover that I could go for 2 minutes without breathing. Yeah. Because that is not easy on a mom. That is hard. And I didn't love the fact that my children were doing that, but they learned amazing things through it. And I just had to be willing to be part of what they were doing. So they went to homecoming. Well, you know what? I was like, hey guys, guess what? I'm going to chaperone. I'm going to help set up the decorations. I'm going to be part of what's going on. And thankfully, because we've just been doing that so long, they just expect it and they welcome me to do it. But I started that when they were young. Mm-hmm. Whatever they are doing, I want to be doing with them. Even if it's the thing that I don't really love, it's not maybe a conversation I'm actually really interested in, they would never know. My child has no idea that we're having this conversation and I can't actually tell you the difference between a Dodger and a Charger. He's told me 10 times.
Hey man, I survived the Minecraft years with my son. I can survive anything. I don't know if you're familiar with Minecraft. Yeah. Man, I was like, man, y'all are backtracking. You got all these good graphics and fancy games. You're playing something that looks like I would have played.
But these square things. Yes.
Yeah. Tell me about his house.
That's a great example.
I don't know what
that's a great example.
Yeah, but man, I was in it. I'm listening. I want to be. I did what I could, man. I'm not gonna lie. I faded a few times, but I did what I could. But yeah. Stuff like that. Yes. When they're in it, I want to be in it too. Because if it matters to you, yes. it matters to me.
That's exactly right. And the thing about that is, I had at the race that you and I our paths kind of crossed over this. I had a mother ask me a very defining question, and I didn't know this whole concept of how do I get my children involved in life together? Like, how do we do this? I didn't realize until this runner asked me, do you make them come to your races? And I'm like, well, no. And she's like, how do you get them so involved and so interested? I didn't really have a great, I don't know. I had never thought it through. I have now come to the conclusion and realized through some time that my children are repeating what they see modeled. I'm at all their games. I used to be at all of their practices. I know the plays. I know what the Titans play call is. I know that's a freeze play back in the day.
Yeah.
I know what the signals are. I knew that. So I could come home and I could have conversations, say, okay, so how many times is your line going to miss the Titans call? Everybody knows it's a freeze play, And so I was invested in what they were doing. But here's the other thing. There is a way to have conversation. How do you get a teenager to talk? It's not easy. By asking questions that are not, that are open-ended, not yes or no. So if we are invested in our children, we can say, rather than how was your day? Fine, which is basically yes or no.
Yep.
Did you have a good day? Yes. You can say, how did that math test go? What you studied for? Was it actually end up being was it the right thing to study? Was the study guide right? How is so-and-so teacher doing? She's just been diagnosed with cancer. Was she there? How do you think she's doing? So your friend that got COVID recently, is he back yet? How is that going? Asking questions that they know you were listening, because you're asking them for feedback back on it rather than yes or no. And then there are times teenagers don't want to talk. And I have said, it's now one of those times you just don't really feel like talking. You're just kind of, bleh. And they said, yeah, I said, you know what? Totally respect it. I understand. How about if we turn the radio on?
Yeah.
And I put in Michael Jackson.
There you go. Yeah. I take 2 teenagers to early morning basketball practice. I just let them veg out. They want to listen to their music, not talk. And I'm good with that. Hey, man, I get it. They're not awake yet. They're about to be, they do their practice before school. So they're teenagers. They don't want to be up early anyway. They definitely don't want to talk.
No.
But man, you give them their space. Y'all go ahead. Listen to whatever you're listening to.
That's right. I've had to learn that with my boys, particularly, that there are times when they are hungry. Not a good time.
Nope.
It's just not a good time.
And the problem is they're always hungry, right? They're always hungry. So you got to pick your battles, right?
They are. That's our, but we can talk about all kinds of things after they've been fed.
Yeah.
And so, timing is important, and it's okay to give them the autonomy to say, now's not a really good time. And you know what? The truth is, most of the time things are not an emergency. I can tell something's up. It's just not a good time right now to talk about it. They're sorting it out. Well, the same is true for me. Sometimes I have things happen and I need to sort them out before I talk about them first.
Yeah.
I need to give them the same autonomy that I need. So I ask them, I just flat out say, is this one of those times where it would be better that we talk about it later? I just want you to know that I care. I can tell something's off, it's okay. We all have it. Is it better, to just let it be for right now and give them some autonomy in it? Always goes better. If you want to be respected, I think we need to respect.
That's great. So you mentioned that you've kind of used sports as a parenting tool. Kind of use some examples from your life that maybe people would like to hear.
Well, I will tell you how it started, and that'll clear it up.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
So I had a defining moment where I had my boys. There was the first day of helmet practice, and I was teaching. Now my older one, we had already kind of been through this, but my younger 2, it really kind of honed in with my younger 2, who were my middle 2 kids. And I was telling them how to put the football strap on, on their helmet. And they were completely blowing me off. Like, Mom, you do not know. You don't play football. You don't know. Now, in their defense, previous to this in baseball, I had a totally wrong concept of a cup. I had the thing put in right side up, wrong way. It just seemed to me like it went better that way.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, boys, but they were wrong. I didn't know.
That's not one you want to mess up, by the way. You need to get that one right.
I had all 3 of my boys in a cup upside down. So, in their defense, they had reason to suspect that maybe I didn't know all things about sports. So, their comment that you've never played football before was correct. I did not know how to play football. I had not played football, but I did know about this chin strap. They blew me off. 2 hours later, we're at practice. The coach is like, hey, boys, it's our first day with helmets. This is how you get it on. Don't forget. Now, when you use this, you've got to get this strap on just right. And he told them the exact same thing I had just told them 2 hours earlier, and they completely dismissed me. It was the exact same thing. And I'm like, that is the darndest thing. Yep. It's the same thing. And they listened to everything that coach had to say. They were so tuned in to every word. I mean, they just hung on every word. This is Pee Wee football now. They're like 6, 7, 8, something like this. And I realized I could use these coaches as my allies. That my boys are so connected to that relationship with their coaches. They care so much about that relationship and what those coaches think of them. And I have an opportunity to help teach my boys how to navigate that, how to all these parts of sports. I mean, they just loved it. And so there were so many things. How do you lose and do so gracefully? How do you win and do so humbly? What do you do? My boys would come home and get in a Suburban and they would be sobbing because the coach was all over their case. I'm like, hey, listen, he's on your case because he sees talent. You need to start worrying when he doesn't care anything about you and he's just blowing you off.
Yeah.
He likes you. And the boys were like, he doesn't like me anymore. No, actually he does. That's why he's on your case, is because he likes you and he sees the talent. And to teach my boys life lessons about how to deal with conflict, how to deal with adversity, how to deal with the smack talking and the trash talking, and to let your playing do your talking for you. And that, what do? You can emotionally react or logically respond, but you cannot do both equally well.
Right.
You're going to have to choose one or the other. In football, that's hard because it's very emotional and it's intense. But I would take opportunities where I saw coaches or another coach on another team or kids start to get too emotional and start making mental errors. And we would talk about it later. You remember when that happened in that game? Guess what that is? That's the mental part of the game that he just lost. And it cost your whole team in penalties. I mean, like 45 yards of penalties is a lot in personal fouls.
Sure. Yeah.
Yep. So it was things like that. How to overcome pre-game anxiety. Oh my goodness. Like my boys would be like, I'm so nervous. And that's when they had phones and they would be, they still have phones, but they had phones. They were old enough to have phones and they would text me. And our joke is they would need, my son called it a prep talk, not a pep talk. He needed a prep talk. And he would be in the locker room texting his mommy, like, I am nervous. I'm scared to death. My chest is hurting. My heart is racing and I am just scared. The kids are huge.
Yeah.
I'm tiny. And we would have to talk about David and Goliath. We would have to talk about what you do with big when you're small. And to remind them that big is often slow and small can be fast. And you don't let them see you sweat. You know, you go out there and you face it. And I would send my kids out to a ball field many a time with stones, just to remind them that even David could fight Goliath as little as he was, but you needed a slingshot, some stones, and a big God. And I just used lessons like that to continue talking to them and teaching them about discipline and, you know, all the things that come with coaching, with sports.
Man, yeah, so many life lessons from sports I picked up. Well, that's what I love about your podcast, that you share other people's experiences and things like that. But what about parents that either they have little to no knowledge, interest, anything in sports, and neither does a kid? How would you suggest? Do you find some other activity, same wheel, and you just do the same thing, go all in on that?
You know what? That's a great question, because I have had some parents say, you know, kind of wanting to fuss with me a little bit about the emphasis on sports. I'm passionate about sports because we have 90% of our kids playing sports. And by the age of 13, more than 70% of them will quit because of a negative experience they have in sports. Either from a coaching perspective, it's either not fun, or their parents don't make it fun. Yeah. So I have a passion for that. But I will tell you, in my upbringing, it was music. it was band. I was blessed to be very musically inclined. I come from a very musical family, and I was very competitive in music. And so that's how I kind of channeled my competitive spirit, I guess, so to speak, into that form. But there are people who do robotics teams. There are people who are really good at writing, and there are incredibly talented young kids who are artists, and they can compete in art competitions and all manner of things. You find out what your kid is good at, and you really work with that, and you encourage them to be involved with them and to go the next step. What is the next step? What would it be to enter your painting into a competition? Like, how cool would that be at 12, you know? And so there are tons of things. The truth is, every kid is gifted at something.
That's right.
But we have to just
got to find it, right? Got to help them find it, right? So that's cool.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's awesome. Right. So if people want to find you, so tell them about your podcast a little bit. So we mentioned a little bit. So what's the name of your podcast again?
Yep. It's called The Uplift Effect Podcast. And it shows my picture on there. It's on most all the podcast sites, but you'll see a sky and birds in a V formation. And so that's actually a picture above my home on my farm here in Alabama. And that was kind of a defining moment during the pandemic, where I had this brewing desire to be able to reach and connect and support parents through podcasting. And I didn't know what to call it. I wasn't really quite sure what I would call a coaching business. And one day, every day for like weeks, I had all these birds coming over, and I think they're actually geese maybe. And they were just loud, quacking, like they were demanding attention. And they were all in these V formations. So I just started Googling, like, what is this V formation? And as I began to read about what a V formation is, how they actually fly in that design, and why it is so specific. And I thought, it's exactly what I needed in my life. When I was a young mom, I wanted and I needed mothers and parents who had gone just before me enough to help give me hope, encouragement, inspiration, and just a reminder to say, hey, you're going to get through this. It's not the end of the world. It may feel like it, but it's not. And that's what the V formation is. What a V formation is birds flying in formation, constantly rotating, but the bird in front, through a process of moving its wing and creating an airflow, helps provide ease for the bird behind it. And then that bird provides ease for the bird behind it. And therefore, they fly in that formation in order to help make the journey together. And I thought, that's what we need. What we need is hope and encouragement, support as we make this parenting journey together, because this is not easy. Nobody do this if you're not really ready for a tough task. Raising children is hard. It is very hard. And so that's how the V formation, you'll see that on my logo. And what I have done is a variety of addressing some specific parenting issues that I come across a lot in coaching. I do a lot of inspirational kinds of talking. I do a lot of it myself, but I have interviewed other professionals and other podcasters, authors, and I am sort of shifting gears a little bit to talk more about the sports component, as I am beginning to write a book about how I have used sports and in my parenting journey. So I love doing it. I love it. And I literally started it in my bed with my Apple phone.
That's all it takes nowadays. Yeah, that's all you need.
I was like, this is great. I'm in my jammies. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
My hair's a mess. I mean, it's great. So that's what the Uplift Effect podcast is about. I take clients, I do some coaching with parents to help them. Sometimes I will do group sessions for a month or so for people who are going through divorce, raising kids in that, co-parenting, very, very tough subject. And so I also am beginning to write my book. I'm putting all of that now on Patreon. So on all of my sites, people will see it. I am going to start releasing parts and chapters of the book into Patreon first. And so that's kind of what I'm doing. And I still do videos. I do a lot of this kind of thing so that parents can have support for this journey.
Cool. Yeah. And I'll link all your information in show notes. So people come check you out, work with you if they need some help out there. Like, hey man, this parenting thing is tough, like you said. So get some help, get some people that fly a little bit ahead of you and know what's going on and can uplift you. So that's a great thing. That's a great mental image there.
And remind you, that's right. We need reminded that we are going to survive. And I want to read you something. This, I think, really, truly is the heart of why I think this matters. And I wrote this morning, and I should have told you about this sooner than just now. But today I made a post, and it's called, "It's Just a Game," they say. And so this is what I believe about this journey. What I know is this: it may look like just a game, and on paper, it is a 60-minute game with a winner and a loser at the end. But the 100 yards that sit between two end zones have provided so many opportunities for lifelong lessons, lifelong relationships, strength that my kids didn't know they had, determination that never gives up, a drive that keeps playing regardless of the scoreboard, sportsmanship even when it takes all you have to keep your mouth shut. This discipline learned here spills over. The grit and the focus practiced here spills over. The ability to compete mentally and physically till the very last second of the game, that spills over. And the humility needed to be coachable spills over. The courage to get back up in front of all of the fans and peers spills over. When I sit in the stands on Friday nights, now I used to walk the fence. I don't see just a game beginning or being played. I see my boys playing out their real life. And what's needed on these fields will be a huge part of what will be needed when they're 40. The medium is just different. The cheering section will look much different, but I hope the backdrop will always look just as colorful because it happens at sunset. It's just a game mentality is for parents who really need a reality check, but for our kids, it's a field of opportunities. That is why I truly believe that sports offers our kids so much value. And as parents, if we would step into that and help be engaged in an active part of it, I think we could do our kids some justice by doing that. We're not going to have perfect backgrounds, but we can take advantage of this right field that they're playing on and participate and be a part of it. And we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to do it all right, but we can do it good and we can do it very, very well.
That's awesome. Yeah, so true, man. I learned so many lessons from playing sports myself, and I coach football, and I got a message from one of the moms the other day that, hey, I have my happy son back. So he was depressed, didn't have any friends. I mean, going through a hard time, like a lot of kids during COVID. And he said, "Thank you." I mean, he's just playing football. You know, you think it's just a game, right? I mean, who knows what could happen to that kid if he could continue to spiral down with depression and being alone. And they had that happy son back. How much is that worth to you right there, right? And then sports gave that back to him. So just finding their thing, right? Helping your kid find their thing and supporting them there. That's great advice right there.
It mattered to me. And here's the thing. When I compete in my own sports, guess what? My kids are just equally involved. They come to all of the things in the pouring down rain. And I run 50 Ks for Pete's sake. I'm not running something that's over in an hour. And they're out there in the pouring down rain, and they're my biggest cheerleaders. And I truly believe it's because they're just doing what they've seen modeled. If we will engage and be involved with our kids, and I think what that mother said to you is so important. Thank you for giving me my happy child back. It is not just a game. No, that's to keep parents in check. For the kid, it's everything to them. It's not just a game, it's your life. And we can be involved in that.
Yeah, I've seen it in my life as well. So before we go, I got to leave you with a dad joke. I mean, that's just my thing. So I
want a dad joke. Yes.
What is the opposite of Disney?
The opposite of just me? I don't know.
Of Disney. The opposite of Disney.
Oh, the opposite of Disney.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's Datney.
I don't know.
You got to say Datney. Then it's better if I can point out my knee, but it's Datney. And you're not supposed to laugh, by the way. Don't be laughing at that. So yeah. Well, hey, thank you so much for all the great advice and all the stuff. I mean, all these hard conversations you're having. Appreciate you coming on here. You don't have to laugh at that, by the way. That's very polite of you, but
Oh, listen, here's the funny thing about this. I've quit drinking blonde roasted coffee because I feel sure. I mean, I have blonde hair. Your viewers don't know that, but I quit drinking blonde coffee because sometimes those jokes, it just takes me a minute.
You used to see it when I try to
that
tell
one
them.
I got.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah. I try to tell these at 5:30 a.m. They don't always go over so well. So I thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for what you're doing out there. I can't wait for the book to come out. It's going to be so cool. I think it's something that's needed right now. So thank you for what you're doing, and keep up the great work.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me share my message. And I hope that it encourages parents that you can do this well. Job well done. And I'm just thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for what you're doing in the city of Huntsville. We need it more than ever.
Thanks all of us doing it right. So thank you so much for coming on. We'll stay in touch. Have a great day.
All right. Sounds good, Joe. Thank you.
Bye-bye.